Artificial intelligence comes down to the ability to both learn and create, as well as mimicking the same sorts of behaviors that we deem as intelligence. While it's a bit circular, let me break it down into what I find to be the three components of artificial intelligence. The first is partial intelligence, and we see these in some of the more traditional artificial intelligence devices early on when we started with GPSs, but going as far back as something like a thermostat. Thermostat, you put it on the wall, you say 68 degrees, the temperature of the air determines what the thermostat does. It senses it goes below 68 degrees and on comes your heat. So that's a very simple, singular task that an artificial intelligence device can have. So this is why I call it a partial artificial intelligence or artificial partially intelligent. The next would be full intelligence. And typically when we say full intelligent, we mean capabilities equal to or beyond human capabilities. So when we think about androids, robots, and things along those lines, when we talk about different chat bots trying to mimic and live up to the standard of human intelligence. The third that I add is actually human intelligence, so an artificial human intelligence. Whereas a full intelligence would have capabilities in terms of computation and pieces beyond the human, I think there are certain intellectual pieces in terms of aesthetics or maybe different psychological elements, anxiety, deceit, ambiguity that are specifically human, that has a gap between what we traditionally think of as artificial intelligence with what we have as something that can mimic and is congruous with what human intelligent capabilities are.
Now, where do you see the most helpful forms of AI within everyday life that people may normally be unaware of?
The construction of infrastructure would have to be the first piece, not only in just laying out, but in the actual building in some of these elements. Again, a lot of this has to do with some of the partial AI, so not full AI, in terms of being able to mimic what we do, live up to the standard that we may define as human intelligence. But anything as simple as the red, yellow, green lights and the way that they change based on who pushes a button to walk, all of those very simple tasks. GPS, I think, may be the most frequently needed piece, at least for myself. Every day when I drive to the University of New Haven to come talk to you folks, my GPS is on, not only because I'm not always certain of where to go, but it gives me alerts to traffic along with a lot of other things. If you use an app like Waze, you know where the police are. All of these different ways that it can aid you in trying to complete what we have as just mundane daily tasks. Being able to sort through different email, being able to cook different meals, be it at McDonald's or some other restaurants where artificial intelligence is starting to be used more and more. So in a lot of these ways we may not be realizing it, but artificial intelligence in getting you to work, and as well as the music you listen to on the walk up the hill or into a building, artificial intelligence is playing a major role in our lives.
How do you use artificial intelligence in your everyday life?
The first is GPS. The number one thing. So if we just take through me coming to the University of New Haven, it starts with me loading my GPS, telling me how to get here and the different roadblocks I may have, as well as tracking me to make sure I'm going there, alerting me with each turn. After my GPS is on, I then go to Spotify, where I choose a song or an artist or anything, and artificial intelligence and the different algorithms built there then tell me and give me the music that I'm going to listen to. When I start to walk up the hill, there's a security guard who pushes a button for me to walk. It alerts the traffic lights and starts going through those pieces as well, so that I can safely cross and that all the lights are going to be red. Once I get on campus, usually one of the first things I do is check my email again. Now my email's already been sorted to alert me from different things. It pulls out the spam, as well as moving certain things to different inboxes based on my class, based on it being a new email or something else if it's from the university or what have you. So these are just some of the basic steps in my day. I shop on Amazon. Now, beginning with just telling me other things I may be interested in, other books I may want, Amazon's shipping process also occurs via artificial intelligence. It has different bots. If you give it a certain code, it can go down a mile-long warehouse, pick out the individual products it needs so they can be boxed, also using some artificial intelligence devices, and then sent out to be shipped. So then after I make that drive home, again using my GPS, using Spotify or another music playlist, an Amazon box is waiting for me at my door, and much of what it took to get there used artificial intelligence.
Have you seen a recent growth spike in the use of AI devices?
Not just the use, but also in the recognition that these devices are actually artificial intelligence. So a lot of it, again, going back to GPS, there's a big revolution about 10 years ago where artificial intelligence really started coming into the fold. Micro-marketing, when we talk about the idea of being able to reach individual consumers on something like Facebook, a lot of that we now recognize as being done through artificial intelligence. The logarithms, the systems, everything's already built, so that once you search something, the computer does it instantaneously. It's not as if there's a person who needs to go through the computations themselves and sees what you've searched, and now they go in and they put a bunch of ads on the side of your Facebook page, your Twitter, all of these things. But once they see the searches, once those cookies and everything latch on to the information that you've given, instantaneously these ads will start popping up. Additionally, personal assistants, smart homes, Alexa, Siri, all of these things are becoming more and more prevalent in the way that people are installing them in their daily lives. Earlier we talked about the thermostat being a very simple one. Now, it's not just a thermostat, but your entire house is being controlled by artificial intelligence. There are new refrigerators that will tell you what you need. Now, you don't need to open your refrigerator door to see that you need orange juice. Your refrigerator is doing that for you. Shopping, not just online, but in person, a lot of this is already being calculated. Amazon's new grocery stores don't require cashiers because as you walk through, everything gets scanned immediately, and in addition to it being scanned, uses your Prime account to automatically charge you through it. So each one of these steps where a person is being replaced by some sort of intelligent object we can go with, that's artificial intelligence being used, even without us recognizing it in its full form.
Has any of your personal information stored on a device ever been stolen?
In, I believe it was 2016, I was living in New York City while I was in graduate school, and there were withdrawals and purchases being made from my debit card both in Hartford, Connecticut and Brooklyn, New York, about 30 minutes apart. And I lost about $4,000. And what happened was, it wasn't just that my information had been taken, but that at some point using my debit card, someone was able to get a copy of that information and actually create their own debit card off of it, in which they were able to go to a bunch of different ATMs and withdraw a few $100s at a time. And this kept adding up, and I ended up losing about $4,000. Now, my bank did not pick up on those things, and I'm not going to call out the bank by name now, as well as put more information about myself out there. But they did end up refunding me. However, those different pieces, another use of artificial intelligence, is having those alerts, so that they can keep going through the different accounts, the purchases, the withdrawals, and seeing that there could be some distance between them that makes it improbable. And this is where I ended up catching it, is that by examining my own accounts and seeing how low I was, I then went in to see each of the purchases, the withdrawals that I made, and more than 125 miles apart, there were purchases being made for about $100 each. So there had to have been something fallacious going on during that. But that was the one incident that I've had where I've lost information, or in this case, money from one of these services.
So do you think the attacking of digital information will stop anytime soon?
I think it's only going to increase. In terms of national security and international issues, the most obvious piece of this happened in about 2007, where Russian hackers invaded the digital infrastructure of Estonia, which is one of the most cyber-centric countries in Europe. they were able to shut down a lot, which puts a lot of threat. Again, if you look at everything from stoplights to the ways that these things are being built, if you shut down a city's infrastructure using some of this hacking and other kinds of invasive pieces that we're utilizing now, you can destroy and disrupt almost anything. I think this is only going to increase. What we're seeing now is that national defense is really becoming a cyber defense. This is how wars are going to be fought. Throughout history, we could say that the most important thing you could have in any form of battle is information. Well, this is the new information. This is where battles are being fought, is in the cyber world.
Do you think people are prepared to face potential attack of their devices?
I think we're more prepared than we have been. Classes like our own here for Cyber World at the University of New Haven and other pieces make students and professors as well more aware of the dangers that are happening. But a lot of it to me seems like we're solving the issue of our lack of awareness more than we are solving major security pieces. The analogy I often use for this is that we don't know how to fix a car, but we now know how to call AAA. It used to be that we weren't aware that there was a problem occurring, and when we caught the problem, we didn't know what to do about it. Now we're able to detect problems, and we can start calling, our banks, our uncle who's good with computers, and start going through that process. Similarly, now we know that there's a rattling in the engine. We see the smoke coming out of the car. We feel it shaking. We know to pull over and we know to call AAA, but much of us don't know how to actually fix and deal with the problems ourselves.
What are some ways that you use to protect your devices from attack?
I think that the best protection that I have is the lack of information about myself. I'm only on one form of social media, and even on that form I have, perhaps in about the last 6 years, posted 4 or 5 times. It's only been a handful of things. I use social media for following blogs and different things like that. I don't post pictures, I don't post information about myself. And I know that's something unfeasible for most people right now. But the less that you have out there, the less there's able to be tracked. When we talk about backdoor entrances into finding out your passwords and different information about yourselves, the more you have out there, it's more information that they being hackers and so on, that they can then use to follow you, to track you, and all of those pieces. I also think just awareness about emails and different things that may come into your contact, knowing what links not to click on, knowing that if you have an image in an email, that leaves you vulnerable because viewing that image is itself a download. And so that allows you to be tracked, as well as just simple password managers, fingerprint managing, all of those sorts of things. The two-step authentications is always going to be key in terms of protecting your devices now that we've got access to that kind of security.
During your presentation on the philosophy of artificial intelligence, you claimed that the mind could be considered a computer in certain examples. Therefore, do you believe that computers today can equally have a mind of their own, being capable of free thought?
So this is where we really start digging into some of the philosophic elements here. That refers to some different parallels both between mind-body as well as with machine. So this kind of computational version of the mind sees the mind as ones and zeros, very similarly to the binary code with which we have computer technology. Part of the issue here when we use a phrase like free thought is trying to define that for ourselves. So when I get hungry and I'm craving something, for example, we'll say I need McDonald's. All of a sudden, that McChicken, those chicken nuggets, the sweet and sour sauce, that's what I need. Now, is that because there have been some free thought? Is hunger itself free thought? I wouldn't say so. However, my craving for McDonald's particularly, is also based on the red, the gold, the arches, all of those different pieces built into it. In terms of free thought, if we have something perhaps aesthetic, being able to create music, well, we see that Google has bots that are able to create music in the form of the Beatles and different things like that. So it depends on the level of freedom that we want to give this thought. Our genetic code, as well as our social predispositions, things that impact us, they determine a major part of our decision making already. So if we're talking about our own ability for free thought, we need to start understanding the pieces behind that. We need to understand our abilities for free thought and the ways that they can be affected in terms of either social engineering or genetic code. Either could be used in an analogous way as a form of programming, similarly to how we view artificial intelligence.
Where do you see the future of AI devices going in the use of everyday activities?
I think the first piece is going to be replacing larger and larger chunks of the workforce. We already saw that right now in Amazon. A lot of their workforce is not only part-time, but is going to and is slowly being replaced by artificial intelligence. A lot of different labor positions. There's a lot of talk about using universities as a spot where we can have artificial intelligence devices not only grading, but potentially even teaching classes. There's a class out of China that recently had this. Genetic engineering is another major area where artificial intelligence could be used. So there are a lot of predictive tests that we have in terms of genetic diseases, for one. But using some of this technology, it's conceivable that once we have some sorts of genetic code, that we can have simulations to determine various outcomes for individual gene combinations, basically taking your DNA and different parts of that and building it into a computer and seeing some various life outcomes. Now, the potential would be there using CRISPR and some of those technologies, as the claim was recently made by a Chinese Dr. He, that he has genetically engineered, or rather genetically altered, a pair of twins who were born. That this technology could allow us the ability to see potential genetic diseases as well as life outcomes, and then going on to alter those. Different types of simulations, particularly for wartime. I think that the more accurate artificial intelligence can be to human intelligence, the more that these types of simulations are going to be used, not only militaristically, but if we're building some sorts of health policies or different policies in other kinds of governmental decision making, the time could come where our devices for simulation, if you think about a Sims game, now think about a Sims game as a country. If we could have a countrywide Sims game in terms of these kinds of simulations, and we're wondering whether or not we should enact a policy, well, all we have to do is create two simulated universes, one with the technology and the policy, or one without. Now, if we let those play out, and if we can do that at rapid kind of speeds, and we'll be able to very easily see what the potential outcomes are. Rather than trying to project them for ourselves, artificial intelligence can give us, if not exact, but it can give us some very good representations and potentials for these different policy-making elements, as well as being able to tell us about ourselves.
The Turing test claims that if a machine can act intelligent, it is intelligent. Do you agree with this statement, and do you have any further points you would add to distinguish man from machine?
So I think that just acting intelligent isn't enough to be declared intelligent. We see this in a lot of people as well as in machines. I think that when we try and understand what intelligence is, when we leave it down to the day-to-day, it allows a lot of wiggle room in areas that we don't need. I don't think you can narrow human intelligence to just menial conversation. Now, I'll go as far as to say some of what makes human intelligence unique is elements of the unintelligible. So I think that the most authentic, most true, most human experience is anxiety, is despair, is angst, is something along those lines. Now, in order for a machine to be capable of those things, now it would take something that seems to be innately human. Not simple fear, but anxiety, despair, these things that we have, these not just emotions, but these sensations, these moods that overtake us, are not simply computed out in these ways. So I think for a machine to reach those levels where it can have sorts of ambiguities and anxieties, I think that's an area that we're pretty far off from. But that's what I think we would need to see in artificial intelligence to declare it intelligent as we are.